Hello, fellow cyborgs, and welcome back to my channel. I'm back for now. I'm thinking that I'm just going to be doing monthly wrap-ups for the time being because work is still kind of there. I mean, good, but yes, responsibilities and time. And I also am trying to read a little bit more than I have been in the last couple months, so that requires give and take of hobbies and things. So I hope you won't mind the upcoming wrap-ups. If I have other things that I want to slip in here and there, I might do that. But for now, just count on monthly wrap-ups from me. I hope that'll be just fine. So let's get into some of the books that I read over summer. It is still very, very hot here, but since it's September, I'm counting it as fall in the hopes that the pumpkin spice things will start appearing sooner rather than later. This is not all that I read over the summer, though I didn't read like a ton more than this. This is maybe like half of the books. I've been down to like 4 books a month, a couple months over the summer. So anyway, here are the highlights, what I want to talk to you about today. If you want to know the exhaustive list, you can catch up on my Goodreads. The link is down below. So I did manage to finish the Skulduggery Pleasant series, at least up until book 9, the ones that I had in my possession. I've been working on rereading the series for quite many months, so getting this finally finished up, which was a bookolution for last year, which didn't get finished, is a very good accomplishment. I'll talk to you just quickly about these two. I can't really talk in like details, obviously, because this is book 8 and 9, but I'll give you a little bit. So book 8, The Last Stand of Dead Men, is probably my favorite book in the whole series. I really loved the warfare aspects of this and how Derek Landy really captured that part of life which is awful and serious and sacrifices have to be made. I just really liked the themes and how dark and kind of adult this felt, but not to a gratuitous level. I just think that Derek Landy really handled this plot well, and I enjoyed pretty much every moment of it. Contrary-wise, The Dying of the Light, which is book 9, is probably my least favorite of the entire series. I was not really satisfied with how it was structured. There were 2 timelines going on, and at the close of this book, I felt that the second timeline that takes place like 5 years in the future of the other timeline that takes place in this book, so 5 years in the future of the events of this series in essence, it felt more like a novella that should have been completely separate and just had space to be its own thing, and I felt it was just not, it didn't fit with the rest of the story. I didn't enjoy it. I didn't think that it was developed to its full potential, nor was it developed enough to feel like it was part of the rest of the story. There were so many fake outs in here that it was just, I couldn't even really tell you what the plot of this is because it was just so jumbled and unorganized, and it was really frustrating to read. That being said, this was a 3-star read still because it's still Derek Landy, but I will not enjoy rereading this, I don't think, when I eventually reread the series again in the future. So what I'm really excited to talk to you about is the reading I've been doing over the last month, so pretty much in the end of July and into all of August, and that has been a lot of classics. I'm so excited that I am excited about classics because it's a genre that I've always wanted to like, but have not really connected with and enjoyed on an emotional level. It's always been an intellectual level, but I read quite a few classics this last month or so, and a lot of them I really enjoyed, so let's just get into it. So I finally finished reading the 6 principal novels by Jane Austen. The last one, and the one I read in July, was Sense and Sensibility. This was a buddy read with a former booktuber, Victoria, and we didn't get to talk about it as much as I had hoped, but it was still lovely connecting with her. Sense and Sensibility got 3 out of 5 stars from me, though it's closer to a 4-star than Persuasion, which I read earlier this year that also got 3 out of 5 stars. The main reason why this was a 3-star, not a 4-star, was because of the ending. Sometimes Jane Austen's coupling happens off stage and it annoys me, because most of the plot, frankly, of a lot of Jane Austen's works are about people getting together. Well, they're about people, And oftentimes there are people who end up coupling. And when we don't get to really see that and be there for that, even though we were there the entire rest of the journey, I find it just really unsatisfying. However, I did really enjoy the characters in Sense and Sensibility more than in Persuasion. There were some awful characters, but they, to my recollection, were more fun to read about than the awful characters in Mansfield Park or Persuasion. And I really liked the emphasis on the sister relationship in Sense and Sensibility. So Emma is still the reigning queen in my Austen mind. We'll just have to see what happens when I eventually reread Northanger Abbey and Pride and Prejudice, both of which I have read not for like close to 10 years maybe, so we'll see if my opinions change, but for now, Emma is still my favorite Austen. Sorry, Sense and Sensibility. For my birthday, my family members and friends got me a few of the Rhodes classics, which I was super excited about because I love the Rhodes classics as a classic line. One of them was Wuthering Heights, which changes the white balance. As you know, if you've maybe heard me talk about before on my channel, Wuthering Heights is one of my least favorite classics. And I decided that I didn't read it correctly after listening to Katie from Books and Things. Katie, you are wonderful. She has pretty much been the only person I have been watching on BookTube because I have been so away from the community. I've been watching her books about classics over and over. So hearing her talk about Wuthering Heights, and her principal statement is, this is not a love story, this is a story of revenge. So I took that to heart when rereading this, and that made it so much more enjoyable. I really, really enjoyed this, and I think that Wuthering Heights will be a book I return to over and over again for the rest of my life. The characters are all completely irritating, if not awful people. I think Kathy's my least favorite, frankly, but you still at moments can sympathize with them, which is something that Katie has mentioned. At the end of the day, allowing yourself to hate these people, and instead of the first time I read this, trying desperately to romanticize them, just made this so much of an easier read. I just reveled in being irritated by people and thinking they were awful, and I so much more appreciated the second generation story. The first time I read this, I thought it was completely useless. But thinking of this as a story of revenge, that second generation is absolutely necessary and is the most important part of this book. This book is weird and like incredibly violent for the time that it was written. And it's full of so many characters that you don't like, you never want to meet them, but the writing is awesome. And even though these people are unsympathetic, you still manage to sympathize with them as much of a, not true grammatically and intertext. What? I'm confusing myself. But anyway, Wuthering Heights. It is now one of my most preferred classics, and I won't tell people not to read it anymore. You just have to completely forget the stupid way that Hollywood spins this as a love story, because it's totally not. It's absolutely not. Or if it is, it's the absolute worst example of healthy relationships. So, Wuthering Heights. I was still in the classic mood, and so from there I turned to North and South by Elizabeth Gaskell, which was kind of brazen of me. I was looking for a buddy read with Sarai from Sarai Talks Books, and she said North and South was on her radar, and I didn't really feel like reading anything on my shelves that she was interested in, so I decided I'm going to be a counterproductive human as far as my 0 by 2018 challenge, which is never going to happen, and buy a book. But I immediately read it, so I feel good. Anyway, North and South. Oh my goodness. North and South was absolutely wonderful. I loved every moment of this. Since I have read another Gaskell, I'm reading another Gaskell right now. Gaskell is my new favorite thing on the planet, and North and South and Mr. Thornton is just... like, the amount that I just loved every moment of reading North and South makes me think that this is my new favorite classic, but I have personality ties to Jane Eyre, and I have nostalgia ties to Jane Eyre, and I have personality ties to Lucy Snow of Villette, so it's really hard to put it up there, but this is one of the few classics that has received 5 stars from me, which says a lot. So the reasons why I love North and South is that it was very easy to read. I loved the psychological depth within here. I also loved that we had a love-hate relationship between the heroine Margaret and hot Mr. Thornton, and we got to see see both sides of that. In Austen or in a lot of just modern romance novels, you see just the ladies' side of the romance, and it's like these men are non-entities who somehow want to be involved, but they never really talk about their feelings. You get a lot of Mr. Thornton's feelings in here, and I loved feeling his feelings. Apart from that, this also has quite a number of deaths, and I thought they were done really well, and I thought that Gaskell explored grief really well, and it was just really, really good. And I also found that the politics of this situation were explained easy enough for me, who's not politically minded, who doesn't really get social implications very well in classics. I understood it. I totally got it. I was there with the characters when they were arguing with one another. So overall, I'm just like blown away by North and South. If you haven't read it yet, I highly recommend that you do. I was just so enjoyable. This is like the gem of the year pretty much at this point. Still on a classics kick, I turned to this one, which I've had in my possession since I took a Victorian novels class in university, which was probably 7 years ago. This is The Odd Women by George Gissing. I picked this up because the back blurb talks about it being about spinster women in the Victorian era, and I liked this, but it wasn't nearly as enjoyable as North and South, and it's not really a Victorian novel I would recommend to a lot of people. I feel like the characters and plot were secondary to George Gissing's feminist or proto-feminist, I don't really know which, I am not a scholar, attitudes and ideas that he really wanted to push forward, which were awesome, but I wanted a good story with characters I really cared about. I also think, so there's a character named Mr. Widowson who's, I don't know if he's like the only introverted character in here, but he's the most overt introverted character in here, and he puts the song that Freddie sings in My Fair Lady, On the Street Where You Live, to a completely creepy, perspective. I will never think of that song the same way again. That just made me sad. I also was sad because the back blurb of my book tells me about things that happen halfway through. I know Katie from Books and Things has talked about this. Why is it okay to spoil classics? Why? Is it okay to spoil classics on the back blurb and in the introduction? Some people like reading these because they like reading them, not because they want to know what happens before they read them. Tiny rant over. I've ranted on this before. So, The Odd Women, I also wasn't a super fan of George Gissing's writing style, but perhaps in the future I will try The Netherworld because Katie loves it so much. We'll have to see. This was, I think, the biggest, dud of the classics that I've read, but it was still 3 stars, so, it wasn't a waste of time. While I was waiting for one of the other classics that I've purchased, because unfortunately I have been buying quite a number of books lately, and I feel guilty about it, but I wish I didn't, and I'm trying to get over it and just suck it up, I decided to reread Villette, which was one of my bookolutions this year, which I've been doing a pretty good job of keeping track of my bookolutions this year. So I reread Villette, and I ended up giving it 4 stars. Last time I read it, I enjoyed it at a 3-star level, but I gave it a preemptory 5 stars. And I think that the more I read Villette, the higher I will bump up the star rating over time. I think over time this will be a 5-star book, but the reading experience this go around, the first volume was a super slog. I nearly disliked it. The second volume got a little bit more interesting and had a little bit more flow and less French that I was translating while I was reading this, so I wouldn't have to translate it again when I reread it in the future. And then volume 3 had a lot of emotional payoff, and then the ending is the ending, and I'm not going to say anything else. I definitely benefited from this reread. I picked up on a lot more that Lucy was trying to hide from the narrator, but the main fact of the matter is that Villette is not a welcoming book. This is about unhappy people. This is about also unwelcoming people. This is about an environment that's isolated and yet oppressive, and it's just weird. There aren't as many charming moments or characters that you don't maybe like but are interesting to read about as in Jane Eyre, but it's really worth it. If you at all connect with Lucy, by the end of this, you will consider her a friend. So Villette's kind of weird for me still, but I definitely still really enjoy it, though I would not recommend it to many people. In fact, I can't think of anyone who I would really recommend it to, but For people who think that Villette might be for you, it's a quieter, more depressed, but more realistic version of Jane Eyre in many ways. Then I think you should definitely give it a go. I think you'll get a lot out of it. Then my second Gaskell finally arrived in the mail, and I got to read Mary Barton because Katie from Books and Things, this is her second favorite Gaskell after North and South, so I thought, sure, I'll go there next. I was enjoying this at a like the 3-star level up until the halfway point. Then plot point happens, and things really get rolling, and you know where it's going. So keep that in mind. I thought that the characterization was a lot poorer than in North and South. This felt more like a first novel than especially compared to North and South, which is probably her masterpiece, a lot of people consider. I didn't really connect with Mary or Jem all that much, and they're supposed to be like the most sympathetic characters in here. Teeny tiny spoiler here, what I'm about to say, but it's not like a plot point spoiler, really. Esther was one of my favorite characters. She was the most sympathetic for me. So, you're fine. I haven't spoiled things for you, but when you read it, you'll know why I kind of warned you. It's fine. Maybe I'll just cut this part out and I'll leave it in. So I think one of also the main turning points in Mary Barton was the 2.5 pages where a character named Will, who's a sailor, talks about mermaids. And I was just like, are you kidding me, Elizabeth? Oh my gosh, we're friends now. You just wrote 2.5 pages about mermaids and I'm reading it. So that was super exciting because, in case you don't know, I like mermaids. So this felt like a really different reading experience than North and South, but it was overall really enjoyable, and I think that I will enjoy it more upon rereading it. I think that some of the political messages were more heavy-handed in here, and I didn't think that the chapters themselves were as organized as in North and South. It seemed like the point of each chapter kind of fluctuated along the chapter's length, as opposed to North and South. You kind of understood what each chapter's goal was, if that makes sense. So that's, first book sort of things to just consider and keep in the back of your mind. But I still really enjoyed this. It was still very readable. The mermaid was just incredibly awesome. And oh my gosh, does Gaskell like to kill characters? She just likes it a lot. So keep that in mind. But Mary Barton, definitely give it a read if you want. I get to listen to Katie's video now. I forgot. I'm going to do that today. And finally, the last book I want to talk to you about is The Wind in the Willows by Kenneth Grahame. So I had aspired to reread this. It was one of my book-olutions because Kij Johnson is coming out with a sequel called The Riverbank, which comes out this month, I think. It's September now. Pumpkin spice around the corner. I ended up listening to this on audiobook, checked it out from Overdrive, and that was really enjoyable. I love Wind in the Willows. This is one of the children's classics that I didn't grow up reading that I love as an adult. It's super flawed. Toad is ridiculous. I don't understand how their justice system works, but the way that Kenneth Grahame writes and the world building of these animals, as sometimes scattered as it is, it's just so people and animals can talk and Toad has hair and I don't understand. It's still, I find it just absolutely delightful. I just enjoyed almost every minute of listening to this. The ending is not my favorite. It gets kind of ridiculous, but the first half is just absolute perfection. Mole is the sweetest thing ever. I am a lot less like Badger than I thought I was, though I'm definitely as curmudgeonly as him. The rat is I wish he was my friend. I mean, my best friend's kind of. Is she like the mole or like the rat? In any case, there are a lot of really great characters in here, and I love the woodland riverbank sort of setting, and it's just lovely. So if you haven't given Wind in the Willows a try and you want a cozy, whimsical, very lovely children's classic, I obviously highly recommend this. I love this. So those are some of the books that I read over the course of the summer. I'm putting them down. They're very heavy. I hope you enjoyed seeing my face again and hearing me ramble about books. I will be back at the end of September or the beginning of October for a September reading wrap-up, if not before doing something else. In the meantime, I hope that you are reading some lovely books. Please let me know what your favorite classics are, because I am nearly uncontrollably adding things to my want list and or buying them off of Abe Books, and recommendations are always fun. Please let me know in the comments down below what the highlight of your summer reading was. I hope that summer treated you absolutely well, you didn't get that many sunburns, you ate a lot of ice cream, and that you are excited for autumn, which is just around the corner. Until next time, continue to be lovely.